Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, they are not done yet in the transfer portal. Over the next couple of days, I'm going to be hosting a couple of really intriguing targets out of the transfer portal. I think most notably, Brandon Sissy from NC State. This kid is a plug-and-play starter, in my opinion, in this Florida Gator secondary, and I don't say that lightly. Because a lot of the Florida fans who've been rocking with the boys, y'all know how I feel about some of the young cats that are in this Florida secondary. This kid's really impressive. We're going to get into him, but I want to start with kind of the overall strategy we've seen from Florida during this transfer portal cycle, where it's not aggressive on paper because they haven't brought in a ton of massive names in the transfer portal. But you talk about retaining guys like Caleb Banks and Austin Barber and Jake Slaughter. They've been very aggressive retaining their roster. And I think for Florida, if you're a Florida Gator fan, I should say, that's exactly what you were looking for. Like, hey, this team in the end of the 2024 year, in that month of November, looked like one of the more dangerous teams in all of college football. If you're Billy Napier, if you're the staff, if you're a Florida Gator fan, you want to just continue that momentum and just bring it to the fall of 2025. And how do you best do that? You keep the players that were on your team in 2024, you keep them within this program going into 2025. That's exactly what Florida has done. And as it relates to transfer portal additions, it was very clear Billy Napier was not in the market for getting into, for a lack of better terms, some bidding wars for some of the best players that you saw in the transfer portal. To me, it doesn't get much better than Caleb Banks. Like, could you have found a better interior defensive lineman than Caleb Banks? Why not focus on keeping Caleb Banks on this football team instead of going out and bringing a new player? I think that pertains to a couple other spots for this Florida Gators team too. Now, I want to get into the names before we do, and as always, to the Florida fans, it's been a blast talking this team. It's really been a blast the last couple months, right? How they closed 2024, what they did on the recruiting trail in the month of December, and then into the transfer portal, the amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas. It means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into what I think is by far the biggest name. You talk about a plug-and-play guy. Brandon Sissy's that guy. You look at the 2023 season as a true freshman, played a lot of football for NC State, kind of battled some injuries in the 2024 year, but when he was on the football field, he was really damn good. And what I love about him is, one, really good in coverage. Take a look at the numbers: 27 targets, only gave up 14 catches. That's a 50% completion percentage when he was targeted in coverage. And I think the number you love the most, 3.4% missed tackle rate. This is a guy that doesn't miss tackles. So not only a really good football player, but the other element to this kid is that he can do a couple of different things, right? He's played boundary cornerback. He's also played the nickel, and you pull up this Florida Gators depth chart and say, hey, we could use some numbers specifically when it comes to the boundary cornerback and nickel spot. And again, I'm a Devin Moore fan. I'm a Dejon Johnson fan. I'm a Sharif Denson fan. I'm a Jameer Grimsley fan. Like, I'm a fan of some of these guys, but if you want to add just a little bit more competitive depth into the room, and a guy that not only provides depth at one position, but probably provides depth at multiple, right? This is a guy that could start for you at nickel. He could start for you on the boundary. Those kind of players who are also good at the sport are really hard to find. What's one thing that say, hey, we're just going to move you to nickel, or we're going to move you to boundary and maybe be average at it. Yeah, Brandon Sissy's shown that he can play both of those positions at a very high level. Now, I personally like him at nickel more because he's a really good tackler. And when you play that nickel position, yeah, you got to be good in coverage, but you also have to support the run game. And Brandon Sissy can do that. And so I look at this potential addition and say, this one, it was pretty clear Florida wanted to add a nickel defender, right? Adrian Maddox from UAB. They went after him very hard, got him committed from Georgia, and then he flips back to Georgia. So it's pretty clear they want a body here. To me, this is just a younger and, quite frankly, better version than Adrian Maddox. Like, this to me would make a ton of sense for the Florida Gators. Now, the other name that you're looking at is Michael Carway from Southern Mississippi, excuse me. Depth guy. I would be surprised, and I haven't watched a ton of them, but I'd be surprised from kind of looking at the numbers. Was kind of a spot duty guy at both safety and cornerback. Again, the versatility, kind of like Triquez Bridges a little bit, where you can bring him in and say, all right, you can play safety, you can play cornerback. If we need you, we got a guy that we think can play. And there are some intriguing traits there too, right? 6'2", 200 pounds. The frame is ideal. Just I don't think he's necessarily a proven commodity at the Power 4 level that Brandon Sissy is. And then lastly, Isaiah Thomas from Miami. This is a guy that was a true freshman, redshirted, didn't play for Miami in the 2024 year. Kind of just an extension of the recruiting class. And I know Florida liked this kid out of high school, didn't really play much for Miami. So you get an opportunity to add a guy that's got 4 years of eligibility remaining, but probably not going to be an impact guy. But you look at the Florida depth chart, you got to feel pretty comfortable. And there's not a lot of red and blue, right? We highlight the names in red, portal additions, blue, who are going to be true freshmen. There's a lot of continuity within this Florida program. And I think that's one of the more underrated conversations you can have in all of college football. We're in this era of college football where you just look at the roster purely. And yeah, that the talent on your roster, this is not me getting up here and saying talent don't matter, because it certainly does. Continuity is also something that I think is really intriguing. And you don't see it very often. A lot of teams are kind of just reshuffling and revolving door their roster every single offseason. That's not really been Florida's strategy. And you go back to, or I think you could look at an Ohio State team and say a lot of the players that are playing right now that are going to be playing tonight in the semifinals, like they were on this team in 2023. And so that continuity is there. Now, I'm a Michigan fan. Michigan, who won the national championship last year, that was a continuity football team. Like, yeah, we're going to make some transfer portal additions when we see fit, but continuity, having guys who've played multiple years together, it matters. And you look at this defense and say, a lot of these guys played football together in the 2024 season. They're only going to get better together in 2025. Then you scroll up to the offensive side of the football, obviously returning DJ Lagway. But one of the things that, stands out to me is look at the offensive line. Not a single transfer portal addition. Why is that? They didn't need to. I mean, returning Austin Barber, returning Jake Slaughter, keeping Damian George out of the portal, and you're returning 4 out of your 5 starters on the offensive line, multiple guys in the 2 deep that played a decent amount of football. I mean, the continuity on both sides of the football, combined with me thinking these guys are good football players, it matters. And you got a plug and play guy like Brandon Sissy to kind of maybe quell the small concern you might have in terms of depth in the secondary. Feeling like you're in a pretty good spot. This is going to be one of the more exciting teams to watch in spring practice, watch in fall camp, and y'all already know how I feel about Florida in 2025. I think this team can be very, very dangerous. Outside of that, you look at the depth chart, there's not a ton of glaring needs. And I think Florida's put themselves in a spot where it's like, hey, we're going to go through spring practice. We're going to see where some of these young kids are at. If you're through spring practice, say, hey, maybe we want to add one more wide receiver, or maybe we want to add one more guy on the inside of the defensive line, 2 positions that is kind of depending on what the young talent looks like. All right, maybe we'll go address in the spring. But right now you're kind of leaning into, hey, let's just keep the same thing rolling from what we saw in the end of 2024. Keep it going in 2025. That's a hard strategy to really dismiss if you're Billy Napier with how good this team played at the end of 2024. We'll close it out there. Brandon Sissy, I think, is a massive target for Florida. We'll see if they can land him. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.